Dorothy asked me earlier why I decided to write about Ferran. And I said, actually, it was a similar reason to the reason I decided to write about Catalan cooking probably 25 years ago when I had the idea and sold the book. And it was really a journalistic decision. In both cases, I thought there was a good story to tell that I didn't think had been told yet the way I could tell it anyway. Certainly in the case of Catalan cuisine, nobody in America had heard of it. Some of the early articles about it, even reviewing my book, referred to the area that it comes from as Catalan. But I discovered something that I thought was remarkable, an unusual kind of food that used all the ingredients I was familiar with from traveling in Provence and Italy, but used them in a different way, quite unique. And it was a good story, so I wanted to tell the story. In the case of Ferran, certainly not an unknown like Catalan cuisine, all in the same place, but I've read articles that say El Bulli was started by Ferran Adria, who invented molecular gastronomy and who works with chemicals in the kitchen and has a scientist on one hand and a designer on the other, and his greatest contribution is culinary foam and blah, 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 blah. And I would read things like this, and I've read all of those statements, maybe not on one place, and every one of them, of course, is completely wrong. And I thought, well, maybe somebody should try to explain what the real story of Ferran is, starting with the fact that El Bulli was born as a miniature golf course about the same time that Ferran was a little kid like this, and that it grew into a very fine restaurant before Ferran had ever heard of it, or they certainly had ever heard of Ferran, and it had 2 Michelin stars. And as Ferran said, before he went near the place, it was already one of the best restaurants. I'm going to ask him some questions, and then you're free to ask either one of us questions. I wanted to start by saying, Ferran, what do you think is the... You? No. What is the biggest misconception about you?
One moment. Good evening, welcome. Esto lo digo siempre en el restaurante cuando vienen los americanos.
Every time Americans come to the restaurant, Ferran always greets them with welcome, good evening.
Entonces, desde la última vez que estuve en Nueva York, la verdad es que entiendo mucho mejor el inglés.
Since he was last in New York, he's learned a lot more English. He understands more.
Si como alguien hable mal de mí, me voy a enterar.
So if you talk badly about him, he's gonna know.
El próximo paso será hablar.
And the next thing he'll be talking.
Pero ahora, mientras hablaba con Mar, hacía una reflexión que sí que es verdad que la podemos aplicar al Bulli, ¿no? Y a la cocina del Bulli.
He was thinking earlier about something that can be applied to the Bulli.
Sí, para hablar la cocina del Bulli.
In order to talk about the cuisine at the Bulli.
Sí, para hacer la cocina del Bulli.
To do the kind of cuisine we do at the Bulli.
Tienes que entender la cocina del Bulli.
You have to first understand the cuisine.
¿No? Es decir, para entender el inglés.
In order to understand
English, para hablar en inglés.
In order to speak English.
Primero lo tienes que entender.
First, you'll have to start by understanding it.
Es una reflexión ahora en un minuto.
He was just thinking about this in the last couple of minutes.
Pero la verdad es que está bastante buena.
But it's a good thought.
Porque sirve para introducir a Coleman, ¿no?
It serves. It will be useful to introduce Coleman.
Antes que nada, de verdad, muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming here tonight.
Hay muchos amigos.
There are lots of friends.
Y mucha gente importante en mi carrera.
And a lot of important people in Ferran's career.
La primera cosa que yo procuro explicar a la gente que trabaja conmigo es que no olvide, que no pierda la memoria, ¿no?
One of the things that Ferran likes to remind people that work with him is that they mustn't forget. They mustn't forget their past.
Por ejemplo, que tenemos a Jack Torres.
Here we have Jack Torres.
Cuando yo era pequeño,
when Ferran was small,
tenía 18, 19 años.
He was about 18.
Este señor con Jean Maximin cambiaron la historia de la cocina, ¿no?
this gentleman, together with Jean-Maximin, changed the history of cuisine.
Es decir, estos señores hicieron, por ejemplo, era un sorbete de espárragos.
For example, he made a sorbet, an asparagus sorbet,
De postre.
as a dessert.
Y después dicen que yo hago cosas raras.
And then they say that Ferran makes strange food.
Sí, está en el libro que hicieron estos señores.
The book these gentlemen made,
No, está Mario,
and Mario as well.
que yo no sabía que vino tantas veces al Bulli.
And he had no idea that Mario had been to the Bulli so often.
No, y que es un súper experto en la cocina del Bulli.
And he's a very knowledgeable person, an expert on the cuisine of the Bulli.
Vino en julio de este año,
He came in July this year,
y cuando me empezó a hablar de todos los platos que había comido,
and when Mario talked about all the different dishes he had had at the Bulli,
me quedé aquello impresionado porque digo, sí que
he
conoce
was
la cocina
very
del Bulli.
impressed. He thought, Mario really knows the cuisine.
Y hay muchos amigos aquí.
And there are lots of other friends here,
Y sobre todo está José Andrés,
and especially José Andreas.
que en un día como hoy tiene todo sentido que sea el protagonista, tanto como
That
nosotros.
in a day as it is today, he should be as protagonist as anybody else.
Porque gracias a él se hizo este libro.
Because it's thanks to him, in fact, that the idea of this book was born.
Cuando hay una reunión como esta en pequeño comité hay que explicar cosas que no se explican normalmente, ¿no?
When there's a small meeting of a group of people, you talk about the kind of things you wouldn't normally talk about.
Porque se me dice, ¿para qué he venido? ¿No?
Otherwise, you'd say, why are we getting together?
¿No? Entonces, José Andrés me llamó, sí me llamó, creo.
José Andrés called Ferran.
Dice, Ferran, tienes que dejar a Colman Andrews que haga un libro, una biografía sobre ti.
He said, you gotta let Coleman Andrews do a biography on you.
Y yo digo, si estoy harto ya ¿verdad? Yo estoy harto de hablar de mí, ¿sabes? ¿No?
And Ferran said, but I'm really tired of talking about myself.
Y además era el año 2007, creo.
And this was probably back in 2007 or 2008.
Estaba muy liado, tal.
He was very busy.
Y entonces Colman se pone en contacto
Coleman got in touch.
y me dice, tal, para hacer un libro. Y digo, no, por favor, no. Dice,
He said, no, not again.
no. Digo, además, si solo tengo 46 años.
He said, I'm only 46.
Las biografías son para gente muy mayor.
That's, you do biographies on older people.
Bueno, entonces pasaron 15 días
So 15 days went by,
y José Andrés volvió
and José Andrés reminded him,
a insistir.
and he insisted again.
Y sobre todo dijo una cosa muy importante,
And he said one thing that was quite important,
que es lo que me han enseñado siempre mis padres, ¿no?
something that his parents had always told him and taught him.
A ser buena gente.
You got to be a good person.
Y entonces José Andrés dijo, Colman es muy buena gente.
And
Tienes que-
Coleman said, Andres said, Coleman's a really good person, he's a really nice
y
person.
tienes que hacer el libro.
And you've got to do this book with him.
Y esta frase fue la que, bueno, pues entendí que sí. Sí.
And it's because of this that he thought he had to do it.
Entonces, también reflexioné sobre el Bulli se hablan muchas cosas,
A lot of people talk a lot of different things, say a lot of different things about the Bulli.
y que hacían falta una serie de documentos donde estuviera la verdad.
And Ferran thought that maybe it was time for some things to be published, to clarify and clear some of these notions.
Nosotros acabamos de hacer, o estábamos trabajando en un catálogo audiovisual,
So they were at that moment working on an audiovisual catalogue.
que son 10 horas sobre la historia del Bulli.
And it's an audiovisual catalogue which sums up about 10 hours of viewing on the history of the Bulli.
Vendremos a presentar aquí.
Ferran would like to come and present this here.
Pero es un proyecto sobre todo podríamos decir, muy técnico, ¿no? Muy de
It's a
cocina.
very technical kind of project because it's very much about cooking.
Y era muy, ¿qué ha pasado? Y ya está.
It's about what happened in the process, in the history of the Bulli.
Y claro, faltaba un documento y sobre todo lo había hecho yo.
And especially because it was something that Ferran had done himself.
Entonces, queríamos tener una serie de documentos donde hubiera gente con toda la libertad del mundo,
But he realized that it was time for other people with an absolute freedom to express themselves
¿ves? Sin ninguna censura,
with no censor,
que pudiera explicar qué era el bulli.
to explain what the Bulli was about.
Sí, entonces, esto era una introducción. La pregunta cuál
This
era.
is Ferran just wanted to do an introduction. So what was the question?
I forgot. No, the question. The question was, what's the biggest misconception about you and your food?
¿Qué crees que es la cosa que más malinterpretan sobre ti y tu cocina?
Todo, no, es muy complejo, ¿sabes? Que para que...
It's very complicated and complex.
Ahora hemos hecho una entrevista para Squire,
We just did an interview with Squire,
una muy buena entrevista.
a really good interview.
Y al final, la conclusión es que yo no sé nada de cocina, ¿no?
And the conclusion was that in the end I realized and I said, I don't know anything about food and cuisine.
Nada, yo no sé nada.
I don't know anything.
Lo único que sé un poquito más que los demás.
I probably know just a bit more than most people.
Es imposible saber de cocina.
It's impossible to know about food.
Solo saber de tomates hace falta una vida.
It would take just a lifetime to know about tomatoes.
Hay 3.000 clases de tomate.
There's like about 3,000 different kinds of tomatoes.
Sí, no estoy hablando de broma.
It's not a joke.
Entonces, fíjate,
So imagine,
multiplícalo por todos los productos que hay.
multiply that with all the different ingredients you can imagine.
Entonces, no sabemos nada.
So we don't know anything.
Y entonces, o uno se pone delante de la cocina con humildad,
If you don't have a very humble attitude when you approach cuisine,
o si no, está muerto.
if you don't have that kind of attitude, you'll be dead.
Entonces, es normal que todo el mundo nos guste opinar de la cocina.
It's normal that most people have an opinion on food and cooking,
Te sientas a una mesa,
because most people sit at a table to eat.
te dan dos cubiertos
You get your cutlery
o palillos
or chopsticks,
y ya sabes comer,
and you know how to eat,
¿no?
right? The biggest influence in the Bulli's cuisine is not now. It didn't happen now.
Es un libro que hicimos que se llama El sabor del Mediterráneo.
It's back in 93. They did a book called Sabor del Mediterráneo, which means flavors of the Mediterranean.
Norman lo explica muy bien en el libro.
And Common talks about this really well in the book.
Bueno, donde hicimos una nueva cocina mediterránea.
They conceived a new concept of Mediterranean cuisine.
Primero empezamos en Cataluña,
They first started with Catalonia
después fuimos por Andalucía, por el resto de España
and then covered other regions of Spain.
y poco a poco fuimos creando un lenguaje
And slowly they started to develop and create a language
sobre algo que se conocía,
that it was a language about something that was known to people that people could relate to.
¿no? Pero que significó un nuevo lenguaje para la cocina en
But that
España.
meant that became a new language on cuisine for people in Spain.
Por ejemplo, el hacer una sartén
For example, to cook in a frying pan,
con un poco de aceite de oliva,
but you put just a drop of oil
una verdura,
and put some
¿no?
vegetables,
espárragos,
asparagus for example.
ahora es muy simple,
It's something very simple and normal to most people.
parece muy normal.
It sounds and appears to be normal.
En el año 85, 86,
But in 1986,
en la alta cocina no se hacía.
nobody was doing it in high-end gastronomy.
En la alta cocina no se utilizaba casi aceite de oliva.
Most chefs in high-end gastronomy then weren't using olive oil.
Todo esto, ¿quién lo sabe del bulli?
Who knows that about the Bulli?